A startling truth emerges: more than 200,000 people have abandoned Crimea, fleeing what was once Moscow's proud jewel. Among the refugees are Russians, Ukrainians, and Crimean Tatars. But the majority are Russians desperate to escape the nightmare unfolding before their eyes.
This exodus isn't merely migration, it's a sign of collapsing confidence, a system on the verge of unraveling.
How did a symbol of Russian victory twist into a nightmare of chaos and fear? To understand, we must explore the foundations of the Kremlin's illusion. After the 2014 annexation, a grand plan was set into motion, a campaign to reshape Crimea's very identity. More than 1 million Russians from the icy north and distant cities were lured with promises of warm seas, cheap housing, and federal support.
They believed they were entering a paradise, a new land of opportunity.
But reality shattered these illusions.
The first shock: behind Crimea's picturesque facade lay decay.
Sevastopol and other coastal areas, once touted as resort havens, turned out to be crumbling relics frozen in a post-Soviet stagnation.
Infrastructure? In ruins. Water systems, roads, power lines, everything was falling apart. Local families described it as feeling abandoned, lost in a ghost town.
Meanwhile, real estate prices soared, soaring far beyond local wages. The average worker earned roughly €400 a month, yet a house in Crimea cost as much as in the outskirts of Moscow. Many newcomers, full of hope, found themselves trapped in poverty, living below the poverty line. It wasn't just the crumbling infrastructure that drove Russians out.
It was an unwelcoming atmosphere, the so-called Crimean mentality.
The indigenous Crimean Tatars and pro-Ukrainian residents refused to accept these newcomers as their own. The arrival of outsiders was seen as occupation, an unwelcome intrusion.
Silent resistance simmered beneath the surface, as communities clung to their land and identity.
One veteran entrepreneur summed it up: no matter how long we stay, outsiders forever.
We're seen as foreigners.
The social isolation bred crushing psychological pressure. Peace was impossible.
Then the war arrived. The so-called special military operation shattered the illusion of safety. Crimea, once Moscow's strategic stronghold, became a battlefield.
The sky filled with drone attacks and sirens. Explosions echoed through the night like distant thunder. The air smelled of fear and dust. Children trembled, families cowered in shelters.
The continuous assault wore down their resilience.
Those who could sell their homes started fleeing, selling properties at bargain prices, desperate to escape the chaos.
Real estate agents report a historic spike in selling, not buying.
Most are fleeing to the Ural Mountains or Siberia, places untouched by war's roar.
Their homes, once symbols of hope, are now liabilities.
The danger of the next missile strike, the threat lurking behind every military base, propels this mass exodus. Yet the escape routes are deadly.
The first, the Kerch Bridge, originally a marvel of engineering, is now a death trap.
Frequently targeted by Ukrainian drones, it's often closed, forcing hours-long waits under threat of destruction. Crossing it feels like Russian roulette with each passing moment.
The second route, the land corridor through Mariupol and Melitopol.
But this path cuts through an active war zone, the battlefield of Ukraine's artillery, tanks, and drones. Civilian vehicles get caught in the crossfire among military convoys. Cars jam together like sardines, stuck in a landscape riddled with danger and chaos. Russian forces and Ukrainian fighters are locked in a deadly dance, turning these escape routes into perilous gambles. The peninsula is isolated, with only two main ways out, both clogged with risk and uncertainty. And as supplies dwindle, especially fuel, the situation becomes even more desperate.
Crimea's once bustling gas stations have gone silent.
Lines stretch for miles. Many stations now refuse to sell fuel, a direct consequence of Ukrainian drone strikes on Russia's refineries. Nearly 20% of Russia's fuel production has ground to a halt in recent months. Explosions, sabotage, and cyber attacks have crippled the backbone of Moscow's energy supply chain in Crimea.
For the lucky few who find fuel, the road ahead is fraught with danger. The Kerch Bridge remains under threat, a potential target for drone or missile attack. The land route, crossing war zones, is dotted with military trucks and unintentional gauntlet for civilians trying to escape. Crimea, once hailed as a proud bastion of Russian power, is unraveling before our eyes. Its population, once full of hope, is fleeing into the unknown. The Kremlin's grand illusion is collapsing, replaced by chaos, fear, and a desperate scramble for survival. As the night settles, the question remains, how much longer can this nightmare continue?
Over 200,000 souls have fled the Crimean Peninsula, fleeing not just homes but shattered dreams.
Russians lead this exodus, outpacing others, a stampede that's no mere migration or orderly retreat. Did you know Russia's prized conquest, once painted as an eternal playground, now sparks a desperate scramble where civilians claw over each other to vanish into the night? Heart-pounding question, how did Putin's imperial trophy morph into a suffocating inferno, forcing his own people to abandon all they built?
This mass flee screams the loudest truth that Moscow's iron grip on internal safety has snapped like brittle bones under relentless strain. Picture it, ears ringing from the relentless buzz of drones overhead, the acrid stench of severed fuel lines choking the air, pockets emptied by grinding poverty, and the icy stares of locals burning from resentment. Crimea, once the sparkling star in the Kremlin's crown, now dangles as a thorny burden, a festering sore dragging the empire down. The peninsula reeks of defeat, where loyalty crumbles under the weight of betrayal. To peel back this unraveling nightmare, we plunge into the Kremlin's web of illusions, spun since 2014, a fortress of deceit crumbling brick by decaying brick. Drawing from global outlets like Asia News and The Express, plus gritty local whispers, we dissect the raw anatomy of this human flood. It kicked off with a seductive allure, empty promises whispered like sweet nothings to gullible ears. Post-2014 grab, the Kremlin unleashed a colossal scheme to warp Crimea's soul by force, importing around 1 million Russians from frosty Moscow. Icy St. Petersburg and bitter northern wastes, baiting them with fantasies of sun-kissed waves, bargain sanctuaries, and state handouts. Echoing Stalin's ruthless blueprint from a bygone era, they evicted locals and plugged in obedient transplants, stitching a fragile patchwork of imposed identity. But this sham tapestry unraveled at the seams, expectations clashed with brutal reality. New arrivals dreamed of utopia, yet staggered into a facade masking hunger and hostility. Their initial jolt? Beneath the glossy veneer of luxury, Crimea rotted like forgotten relics from the 1990s. Flashy facade aside, Sevastopol and coastal gems stood as hollow shells, peeling paint revealing cracks where dreams once lived. Funds bled dry into barren military camps and hollow boasts of glory, leaving civilian life in tatters. No blueprint for growth, just frayed veins, water pipes groaning under rust, power lines sizzling in the wind, roads splitting like open wounds. As one wearied family confessed, echoing their isolation. We wander here adrift, marooned in silence. The grind felt insurmountable, a tactile choke, fingers raw from fixing leaks, wolves howling at empty bellies. Vivid hopelessness clotted minds, yet this was only the prelude to deeper wounds. What twist awaited when war's cruel trumpet sounded, exposing the raw betrayal in full agony? Could psychological scars bind tighter than chains, turning even the air into a foe? In the shadow of a once glamorous facade, Crimea's dark reality is crushing its residents. The streets, once lined with promises of prosperity, now echo with the sounds of despair and uncertainty. As infrastructure crumbles behind the glossy images, the true cost of Moscow's occupation becomes painfully evident. Imagine a community where dreams of a better life are shattered by high prices, hostility, and constant danger. Housing costs soared well beyond local wages. While the average salary hovered around 35,000 to 40,000 rubles, about €400, the prices for homes matched those in Moscow's suburbs. This disparity plunged many newcomers into poverty, crushing hopes of paradise. But the real pain went deeper than concrete and steel. It was the suffocating atmosphere, the Crimean mentality. The local Tatars and pro-Ukrainian residents still cherish their land, fiercely attached despite occupation since 2014. The arrival of Russian settlers, seen as liberators by Moscow, was viewed as an invasion by the native population. Silent resistance and quiet anger grew. Nearly 30 to 40% of locals were forced to leave their ancestral homes. Those who stayed felt the weight of social isolation, an invisible prison where neighbors are enemies, trust eroded to nothing. As one entrepreneur admitted, they are forever outsiders, always regarded with suspicion and hostility.
Then came the war.
What Putin called a special military operation shattered the fragile peace.
The invasion turned Crimea into a battleground rather than a sanctuary.
Long-range missiles, drone swarms,
and constant air raid sirens now dominate daily life. Families live in fear of the next explosion, their homes transformed into fortresses or abandoned ruins.
Night after night, air defense systems roar to life, explosions lighting up the sky, chilling screams piercing the darkness.
The psychological toll is staggering. Children suffer panic attacks, families are exhausted, and hope dwindles. Many Russians, desperate to escape this living nightmare, begin selling their properties en masse. The once bustling real estate market is now a frantic race to leave.
Homes near military bases are sold at a loss, doors closing behind those fleeing for the quiet safety of Siberia or the Ural Mountains. Now, a grim reality sets in. Crimea's strategic arteries are under attack in a new, devastating way.
Fuel supplies, the lifeblood of this isolated region, are vanishing.
Nearly 50% of gas stations have run out of gasoline.
Lines stretch for miles, silence interrupted only by anxious honks and whispers of dread.
Ukrainian drone strikes targeting oil refineries have crippled Russian-controlled fuel production, slashing nearly a fifth of refineries' capacity. Even Russia's own officials admit the grim truth: refinery outputs have declined sharply, and fuel is now a rare commodity.
The once unbreakable supply chain is shattered. For many residents, there are only two treacherous routes to escape: the infamous Kerch Bridge or the war-torn land corridor through Mariupol and Melitopol. Both are death traps. The bridge, once a symbol of power, is now an active battleground, dangerous, unpredictable, and targeted relentlessly. Hours of agonizing waits, the shadow of drone attacks, and the constant fear of explosion turn every crossing into a game of Russian roulette. The alternative route, through the war zone, seems no safer. Armed convoys fill the roads, grenade explosions and artillery shells are a constant threat. Civilians trying to flee find themselves caught between army trucks and deadly Ukrainian fire. The streets are no longer roads, they are battlegrounds, where every second could bring catastrophe. With fuel running scarce and borders only narrow pathways to safety, the question looms: who will survive? Who will make it out before this nightmare becomes permanent? As the walls close in and hope diminishes, the future of Crimea hangs in the balance, dependent on a risky escape from the chaos and destruction that now define this once prized territory. The countdown has begun. What more horrors await behind these lines? Russian citizens, worn down by relentless air raid sirens piercing the night, the thunderous booms of air defense systems, and the harrowing panic gripping their children, have had enough. Fed up, they've started dumping their properties, desperate to flee Crimea. Picture this: how did Putin's cherished conquest, once touted as an invincible stronghold, morph into a powder keg forcing Russians to abandon their homes at rock-bottom prices? We're about to uncover the shocking truth behind this mass sell-off. Real estate agents in Crimea are swamped like never before, not with eager buyers, but frantic sellers hawking their prized possessions. Over half of the newcomers who bought in are now scrambling to offload, their once dreamy seaside retreats now nightmares they can't escape. A local agent, quoted in a media report, lays it bare: neither they nor their kids can stomach those unending sirens, and forget about the blasts rattling the windows and shaking the walls. Military bases dotting the southern shore, symbols of protection that lured them here, have flipped like a twisted prank. Now they're ticking bombs, each a potential inferno. Homeowners near these sites are practically giving away their villas, rushing to remote corners like the Ural Mountains or Siberia, places where the roar of war fades to silence. Why? They know full well that Ukraine's Storm Shadow missiles, whistling through the air with deadly precision, could obliterate an ammo depot just steps from their bedsides, turning their havens into dust. This isn't some casual move to a quieter town. It's the brutal unraveling of Putin's grandiose Crimea gamble, crumbling under social and psychological strain. Fear alone might push one to run, but escaping demands fuel for the car, and here's the jagged twist: that very lifeline has been choked off, trapping these Russians in a web of desperation. Ukraine's brilliant strategy strikes deep, targeting the veins of Russia's war engine by crippling refineries. Crimea teeters on the brink of its worst fuel drought since the 2014 grab, a calculated chokehold, not mere chance. Russia, bragging as a top energy giant, can't even supply gas to its occupied lands.
Almost half the pumps in Sebastopol and beyond stand silent, their nozzles dry, while endless queues of cars stretch like serpents under the scorching sun, exhaust fumes choking the air, honking horns a cacophony of frustration.
The culprit? Ukrainian sabotage drones, slamming oil refineries far in Russia's heartland. Reports from major outlets reveal 17 to 20% of Russia's refining power gutted.
Even the Kremlin's appointed overseer admitted a staggering 10% plunge in gasoline output over recent months.
So, for those rare souls who snag some fuel, where to? Crimea dangles isolated, routes few, and fraught with peril. Two paths loom, both cesspools of danger. The Kerch Bridge, Moscow's vanity project, now a death trap, a bullseye for Ukrainian kamikaze drones and missiles.
Alerts slam it shut for stretches, trapping drivers in halted chaos, the air thick with tension, the bridge's cables groaning under hidden threats, a game of chance where crossing feels like tempting fate. Or the overland route through Mariupol and Melitopol, slicing straight through active battlegrounds. Roads choked with troops amid the stench of diesel and gunpowder, artillery thuds echoing, your civilian hatchback wedged between battleships on wheels. No smooth highways here, just frontline extensions, where Ukrainian shells could strike any second, and see ferries grind to a halt under drone shadows.
How far must one crawl to freedom, only to hit barriers that scream betrayal? As hunger for escape burns hotter, what darker secrets lurk in Putin's crumbling dream, ready to shatter hope?
The recent gasoline shortage on Crimea is no accident. It's a calculated blow by Ukrainian forces. Drone strikes targeting Russian oil refineries have disrupted nearly a fifth of Russia's fuel production. Essential supplies are drying up, and entire regions are plunging into chaos.
What does this mean for the thousands desperately trying to escape? The answer is shocking.
Imagine the scent of burnt fuel lingering in the air, the distant hum of drone engines overhead, and the gritty taste of fear on your tongue. Russian refineries, once considered vital, are now crippled, 17 to 20% of capacity wiped out. Even Russia's appointed overseer admits that gasoline output has plummeted by 10% in just 2 months. This isn't just a logistical glitch, it's a rupture in the entire supply network, exposing the fragility of Moscow's hold over Crimea.
So, where do those who want out turn? The peninsula's isolation leaves them with only two options, and both are deadly. The first is the Grand Kerch Bridge, once Russia's pride.
Now, it's a battlefield frequently targeted by Ukrainian missiles, drones, even unmanned surface vessels. Every trip across is a gamble, hours of waiting, inspections, and the ever-present fear that the bridge could explode at any moment, turning a journey into a game of Russian roulette. The deafening sirens and the cold metal of the vehicles form a haunting backdrop to this nightmare.
The alternative is even more perilous, the land corridor along the Mariupol-Melitopol line. To reach mainland Russia,
civilians must navigate a war zone alive with Ukrainian artillery and HIMARS missile systems. The road becomes a nightmare, vehicles clogged between military convoys, tanks, and ammunition transports.
It isn't a highway, it's a battlefield.
Every moment is a potential trap, with Ukrainian forces capable of striking at any convoy, turning escape into a desperate race for life.
As chaos reigns on land and sea, the question persists, how much longer can this nightmare last? And who will be left to tell the tale?
Crimea has become the front line's new backyard.
The roads, once scenic, now feel like a trap.
Military convoys clog every street, their engines roaring amid a tense silence. Civilian vehicles trying to escape the chaos find themselves stuck between towering tanks, cluttered trucks, and looming weapon carriers.
The scene looks like a battlefield, not a highway. Are you wondering how long this nightmare can last? The answer might surprise you, because it's only getting worse.
Now, the conflict spills over beyond the roads. The entire infrastructure is crumbling.
The sea, once a peaceful stretch of water, is now under threat.
Ukrainian forces can strike at any moment, targeting ferries, submarines, and even drones that attempt to cross.
This continuous threat has turned Crimea's land and sea routes into chaotic logistics nightmares. The economy suffers as gasoline prices skyrocket faster than ever before. Farmers are unable to fuel their harvests, trucks sit abandoned along the roads, their cargo worthless. Russia's reliance on supplies from the mainland becomes a deadly vulnerability.
Food shortages, heating failures, and a crippling lack of essentials threaten millions.
The entire region is on the brink of collapse. The intriguing question is, how much longer can this silent disaster last? The answer, and the stakes, are higher than you think. Because this exodus of civilians signals more than just despair, it's the beginning of Russia's retreat from Crimea.
This mass migration isn't just people fleeing.
It's a strategic blow to Moscow's grip on the region. In modern hybrid warfare,
the local population is a key asset, serving as a legitimacy shield and a source of manpower. But with hundreds of thousands leaving, that shield is cracking. Experts warn that within a year, up to 80% of Russian civilians could abandon Crimea altogether.
What will remain? A tight-knit enclave of pro-Ukrainian residents, Ukrainians and Tatars, and a hardened military presence. The exodus threatens to cripple Russia's intelligence network in the region. With fewer loyal local residents, the risk of sensitive information leaking to Ukrainian forces grows exponentially. How will Putin's strategy hold when the very fabric of occupied Crimea unravels? The coming months could redefine control and perhaps even change the course of this conflict forever. The question remains, can the Kremlin stop the collapse before it's too late? As the full picture emerges, a chilling realization dawns: Crimea, once a shining jewel of Russia's imperial ambitions, is rapidly turning into its worst nightmare.
The exodus isn't just among civilians. High-ranking military officials, FSB operatives, and government insiders are secretly liquidating their assets, slipping away under cover of chaos. Imagine the commanding officers selling their homes and luxury cars, their families pushed into safety, while the soldiers are left to hold the crumbling front lines. This behind-the-scenes panic reveals a startling truth: the very backbone of Russia's strategic hold on Crimea is dissolving from within. Every minute, more signs of disintegration surface: troubled commanders abandoning their posts, families fleeing for safety, high-value assets quietly disappearing. When the top brass starts packing up, it sends a clear message to everyone: this fortress is collapsing. The military that once prided itself on strength and dominance is now riddled with uncertainty. Soldiers inside trenches hear rumors, sense the fear among their commanders, and ask themselves, are we truly defending a land that's already lost? Meanwhile, Ukraine's relentless tactics are dismantling Russia's defenses piece by piece. The once formidable S-400 missile systems sit silent, unable to provide protection. The Black Sea Fleet is confined to its ports, scared to venture out. Air bases are battered daily, air raid sirens become a constant backdrop to life, spreading panic and chaos. The strategy is crushing Crimea from all sides, stripping away its ability to project power, turning it into a liability that demands constant, resource-draining defense. This is more than a battlefield failure, it's a profound psychological collapse. Fear spreads like wildfire. Families, soldiers, officials, all seeking escape routes as the news tightens. And the most unsettling twist? The very people supposed to defend Crimea are slipping away, knowing that the fortress they once protected is crumbling into dust. What remains of Russia's empire here? A ghost town of broken dreams and retreating figures, an ominous sign of the empire's grand illusion finally cracking under the weight of truth. The strategic vision that Ukraine is implementing is aimed at completely immobilizing Russia in Crimea. They target the essential systems, striking the radars to cut communication links, blinding the air defense towers, and severing supply routes, effectively isolating the entire peninsula. This method is working diligently, gradually tightening the encirclement around Crimea. Every Russian family trying to escape feels the constriction growing stronger. They see the truth not in government broadcasts but in the fiery explosions outside their windows, in the billowing smoke rising from ammunition depots. The stark reality is clear: Crimea might fall into Ukrainian hands one day. Few ought to wait for the final papers signing or the lowering of the last flag. Once a symbol of Putin's expanding Russia, the peninsula now epitomizes its decline. Once viewed as a paradise and a jewel of power, it has devolved into a hellish trap from which escape becomes a desperate necessity. Fuel is scarce, safety is uncertain, and hope seems non-existent. Only chaos, fires, and the echoes of Ukrainian footsteps remain.
A silent but profound process is unfolding, those leaving are unlikely to ever return.
Though the world might focus on the battlefield, the true battle involves the people, the civilians and military alike, trying to flee a collapsing empire's last grasp.
The grip is tightening daily.
This reality is unspoken but unmistakable. If an occupying power cannot control its own people, its hold on the land becomes meaningless. The countdown has begun. Russia's presence in Crimea is nearing its end. And the clock shows no signs of stopping.
The last ships are preparing to depart. The question is, who will be left behind, those brave enough to stay or those destined to be part of the exodus? The final escape may be imminent, and there's no space left on the final vessel. What are your thoughts on this unfolding catastrophe? Your opinions matter.
Share your insights, and remember, this story is just beginning.